And that's kind of what associations, I think, are starting to understand that they can provide, is that they have things like publications, webinars, a ton of learning opportunities, events, all this historical data too, that could be presented to people in that kind of experience where it's like curated for them.
Welcome to Modern Marketing Messages, the leading podcast discussing the latest and greatest in both online and offline marketing tactics, strategies, and trends. I'm your host, Taylor Karg, marketing content writer at AmericanEagle.com. Today, we're going to explore the unique challenges that associations are facing in the digital space and how they can overcome these challenges to thrive in the future. I'm excited to be joined by two experts from AmericanEagle.com. They both bring a wealth of experience in working with associations. First, we have Allison Lundberg, who will be sharing insights from a digital marketing perspective. And then we also have Will Levinson, who will be sharing a perspective from, technology, website architecture, all that good stuff. Welcome, Allison and Will. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Can you guys start by explaining a little bit about your role here at AmericanEagle.com and then as well as, your experience in working with associations?
Sure. Like Taylor said, I'm Allison Lundberg. I am a senior digital marketing strategist and I'm a team lead. So I have a team of 4 strategists on my team. I also have clients of my own, some who are associations. And we go through and look at all of the data, trying to understand what their goals are, what channels they support, and then how we can grow their business overall. So I do that in various different industries, but I actually came from an association background. I worked for associations for about 11 years and do have my CAE credential for Certified Association Executive.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And Will, how about you?
So I am an account executive at AmericanEagle.com. I'm actually celebrating my 10-year anniversary of my interview with AmericanEagle.com this week.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
happy 10 years.
thank you so
Time
much.
flies, doesn't
It does. It has flown. And in my role, I work with associations, with all kinds of different organizations on sort of website projects of all shapes and sizes, whether that is transforming to a new platform, redesigning a platform that you already have, thinking about things like content strategy for a new, version of what exists today, looking at building an app, looking at building a portal, looking at integrating with new AMSs, LMSs, all different kinds of systems. That's my job, is focusing on sort of projects that come up in the life cycle of an association. And like Allison, I actually also come from the association and nonprofit world. I started my career working for the National MS Society.
Oh, wow.
And then after that, I switched to work for a couple different technology companies. But prior to AmericanEagle.com, I was working with a partner for an AMS system called IMIS. So supporting associations with their AMS for about 4 years before coming here.
So it sounds like you two are the perfect people for this exact episode, almost like we planned it. Wow. So I think we should start by setting the stage of just talking about the different challenges that associations face today. Who wants to start? Do we think it makes sense to start from, the digital marketing side or the website side?
I think we can start pretty high level because I think of a lot of challenges that they face is both with digital marketing and web.
Yeah.
Because when you think of like an association life cycle, they're always looking for recruitment, getting people to join their association, engagement, having people, once they become a member, have activity within the association and find value in it. And then retaining them. So it's really making sure that they have the right tools and tech to be able to do what they need to on the website, but then also have the visibility of what they do through social and email and have all those touch points to make them feel special. So there's a lot of different angles that we can take from that. So
yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think with all of the association clients I work with, there's a sense of we have really good programming, we do really good advocacy, we have great services, but there's always a sense of we support this type of population, and we know that there is a possible membership of up to, let's say, 10,000 people, and we only have 4,000. So that last 6,000, that is sort of the focus. That's the big challenge of exactly what Allison said. How do we get them How do we, find our way to them? How do we engage them with the different services we have, and how do we keep them coming back? So I would say that is for sure the conversations I have the most are trying to figure out sort of the gap between what we do as an association, what we produce and build and provide, and then the gap to be filled of how do we get more eyes on this? How do we become more effective in sort of showcasing that?
In your guys' experience, have these challenges kind of evolved over the last few years, or have they been kind of the same, over the decade of experience that you guys both have?
I think they've been the same challenges, but in a different light. Because before COVID, there was a lot of in-person events. There were a lot of small groups, little things that you can do, either within like your county, your society, your nationwide for conferences, anything like that. And then with COVID, I think it really put the pressure on the overall infrastructure of what technology they had available and what they could afford to. So then it's like, what type of value can I get from a digital perspective? And so it's really been kind of pushing that mark to move things forward. So same challenges, but a very different light. So now I feel like future focus, now that we're back to in-person events and we're kind of trying to meld the in-person and the digital experience together so that the people that they captured during COVID and the people who they had before kind of had a unified experience, and we can offer multiple things to multiple different people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think prior to COVID, I had association clients where 50 or 60% of their revenue came from events.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about those like business pillars of recruiting new members, engagement and retention, engagement relied very heavily on events. It's like a hallmark of an association sort of calendar year is different chapter events, an annual conference, probably lobbying events, things like that. And when that goes away, you still have the same challenges. You still have to create engagement, but you sort of lose a huge avenue for that.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been, I think, probably one of the biggest challenges to just the association space over the past couple of years is understanding what engagement means and can mean, and looking at how sort of digital experiences can bridge those gaps, how digital experiences can keep people engaged and connected to each other. Because that's another big part of an association, right? Is an association, everyone who's a member reflects something that I have too, whether it is a professional credential or, a cause I care about. Losing those in-person events has been a big challenge. And so because of that too, I think that a lot of the projects that I've been working on with customers are focused around what does engagement mean now?
Yeah. Have you guys found that, I mean, now we're COVID, it's 2024, COVID, kind of the big boom was 2020. How have things progressed with like in-person events? Are we kind of back to where we started? Or is in-person events even as big as they once were? Is it getting there? Like, what's that sentiment?
I just actually got back from the ASAE annual conference, and it was big.
Okay.
It was good to see a lot
That's
of
good
people.
news.
I know, it really was. And you still see people who's like, I haven't seen you in a couple years, and it's that like refilling of the well. And I think people are craving that now, because we're in such a digital space. Like even associations when they're at work, maybe they're 100% remote right now. We're seeing that a lot in the association space. So like this is their opportunity to be with people like them,
Yeah.
no matter what their connection is, whether it's industry, their job, something that's near and dear to their heart. So I feel like they're back about 100% and maybe more because people are really longing for that like person to person connection.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think most of my clients now are at least hybrid in the association space. So I think that part of the association world has changed a lot.
Yeah.
Of most of my clients are working fully remote.
Yeah.
But the events now, I think associations have learned to not rely solely on that. So they're sort of an additive to a whole suite of different engagement like tools. But because of that, I think there are a lot, at least my clients have been more strategic about what kind of value do we deliver at our events. And so I think events are oftentimes a lot more targeted of like what our goal is for this event, what the theme is, where it's going to be and why, as opposed to just sort of generic annual conference.
Let's just have an event.
Exactly.
We're an association.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that's actually been a good thing. So I do think people are finding a lot more value from these events. And like Allison said, the events I've been going to recently do seem to be pretty large. So I do think associations are really building that back up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like what you said there, Will, about just COVID has created a space to get more creative and be more intentional on what we're all doing and why, instead of just, going to an event for an event's sake and kind of thinking outside the box there. So let's talk a little bit about some common mistakes associations make when it comes to, their digital marketing strategies as well as their website strategy. So should we start? Let's start with the website. Will, what are some common mistakes that the associations make?
Common mistakes. I was sort of hoping that Allison was going to answer this one first.
So
we can switch.
No, it's fine. I think that the common mistake that I'm working with associations to really understand is, how do we adapt trends and technology in a way that makes sense, right? I think that there's always this desire to take advantage of trends in, commerce online, which is a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the sort of strategy behind, how do we get conversions from people on our website? How do we make it easy for someone to go through a process? And I think that can lend itself to making a website that's too commercial in some ways. And I think that opens up the door for all kinds of technology problems too, right? So I think the lack of sort of moving forward with a comprehensive plan, honestly, is I think where we find the most trouble. Is there's organizations that want to take advantage of like conversion science, if you want to call that, the things that like Allison and her team work on, of how do we optimize these experiences? How do we optimize people's engagement through buying services, buying publications, registering for events? How do we produce that, but also not lose sight of the identity of the organization, or walk into a trap of like buying this piece of software off the shelf because it fits a gap that we think we have, but we haven't really planned out the whole world of the tools that we have.
Yeah.
So that's something that we are working on a lot, is sort of the big picture when we're thinking of a website in general. I think we're using the term website for an association to mean a lot of things, right? It's sort of like the web ecosystem.
Yeah.
So website, AMS, LMS, event management tool. Some associations have a CRM on top of their AMS. So like thinking about all those pieces, I think that's honestly where we see a lot of the mistakes is moving too fast to like grab new technology, or the opposite, right? Trying to build out the technology they have to meet some functionality that they see from, like Amazon. Everyone wants an Amazon experience. But that's honestly where we see a lot of trouble, is people not understanding what Amazon does well.
Yeah.
And just moving too fast towards buying a commerce tool or something like that.
Well, and we always say, I think from the bottom line at AmericanEagle.com, is just because it works for one business and one website doesn't mean it's going to work for every single one.
Right.
Everything is unique, and you have to be willing to, put in that effort to really understand exactly what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, Allison, common mistakes for digital marketing.
I think primarily it's trying to be everything to everyone, everywhere, all at once. And within associations, it can definitely vary of what your marketing department looks like, or whoever is touching social media or email. It felt like we were always chasing whatever the newest shiny thing is without pausing to put together a strategy and find out what's working well. So I think it's really defining those goals, putting together an omni-channel strategy to see how they fit together, and looking at the data and analytics to see where people are actually coming from and where you should put your efforts.
Yeah.
So it's like taking that step back instead of being like, oh no, we have this application that's opening next week. I forgot to tell you, we need an email sent out. Make sure you post on social media and it's fine. We'll just get it out there. And it's not fine. We do need to pause, and we need to plan and put a campaign strategy around all the efforts that we do. A lot of people wear a lot of different hats within associations, and sometimes your education and your social person could be the same. So it's also communicating throughout the entire organization. What are our goals and what are we actually looking to achieve with the marketing that we're doing? So we don't want to lose sight of what that big shiny thing is that we're chasing and what's actually going to make us money. Because if you don't have your events to fall back on, you need to promote more of your products. You need to push membership a little bit harder. And it's making sure that you have the balance between everything, and understanding the data to be able to push through the strategies you need to hit the goals for your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said money. I'm wondering about budget. Where does budget fall in with associations, marketing, website technology, all of that? Is there, in your experience, is there not enough budget and too many ideas, or what is it like?
Associations have a marketing budget. That's what I'll start with.
Yeah. Okay.
It felt like there was never enough carved out for any type of paid advertisement. So you're
Okay.
looking a lot organically of how can I get visibility? How can I drive people to my social platforms? Who do I have within emails to target so that you're using the resources that you do have? So it's always kind of like tightening that belt buckle a little bit more because we do want to put more budget towards putting together a new product or putting on a new review course or something like that. So it's challenging to try to get even $1,000 to do a paid ad for advertisement for your annual conference, things like that. So having those conversations will be good, but you need the data to back it and say, this is something I want to try to be able to benchmark it. So there's usually not a lot of budget within some of the smaller organizations. Some of the larger organizations might have a little bit more and you can do a lot more planning that way. But it's really what's scalable for your business that will actually result in getting those conversions and those signups.
Yeah, I think the challenge that I come across a lot is the idea of scalability and knowing when is the right time to invest in a platform or a solution or a strategy that's going to give you that scalability. Because that's always the balancing act, right? Is knowing that we have a need to be more flexible, be more agile, and make better use of our dollars. Sometimes a lot of your budget is going to, especially in the association world, like monolithic AMS platforms, CMS platforms, and newer technologies may cost money to implement. But when we're talking about an organization like Allison said, where the publishing workflow, maybe department heads are publishing their own content, right? And that may be the ideal, that you want people to have that kind of flexibility. What is the cost of not doing something like that?
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the big sort of challenges we always work through. And a lot of it's a question of timing. When is the right time to make a change like that? But I do think there's a conversation to be had at a lot of associations about, we've been on this platform for 15 to 20 years sometimes, and have done a heroic job of kind of creating workarounds, integrations that probably shouldn't be there, all kinds of, back channels to get things to happen. And at what point does that cost a lot of money that we're not considering? So I think money is for any company, association, for a for-profit company, money is always important. And I think it's just a question of the cost of not changing things sometimes. Because I think that from our experience with our customers during COVID, some customers took the opportunity to dive into like a digital transformation. And some companies took the opportunity to really focus on sort of battening down the hatches, putting dollars towards, advertising or whatever it may be. And I think that there's definitely lessons learned from both sides about how those investments have made an impact on things like membership or engagement or, retention, the three things that we talked about at the start of, these overarching goals that I think are true for any group.
Have you guys found it difficult? I mean, I'm sure every customer is different, but like to have that budget conversation, and is it normally just like you're kind of like going into it scared? Because I mean, it seems like there's just a lot of factors going on. So how does that typically go?
Shockingly, most associations that I've worked with they know exactly how much they can spend because it's within the
from
budget.
The start. So
they're like, we had a surplus from last year, or we got this credit back, or we got a grant and this is what we're going to spend. What can I get with this dollar amount?
Okay.
And that's when we go in and say like, well, what are the goals? what are we looking to achieve? Where do you want to be? And then talk about what that scalability is and what we can implement. It's pretty cut and dry from what I've seen. It's not like, oh, this could be 50 to 150,000.
Yeah.
They come in, they're like, I have $45,000 to spend. What can I get?
Okay. And Will, obviously, like website replatformings, just redesigns can be very costly depending on like how much work is required. Have you had a hard time, like, I guess delivering the budget and having people accept it?
That's an interesting question. I think what Allison said is very true. Associations typically know their budgets very well. And I think, again, it goes back to timing. Oftentimes we're able to plan ahead with our customers of like, okay, let's plan for next year's budget and think about how to be creative. And when I say creative, it's not like, what do we get rid of or what do we not take on? It's more of a question of, are we looking at things the right way? So I'll give you a very specific example. I'm working with a customer right now that is replatforming. And so in a vacuum, they're looking at our CMS budget is annually $30,000. There's another platform that they're looking at that's $100,000 a year. However, within that $100,000, they are getting a search platform that they're paying $20,000 a year for. They're getting a DAM, which they're paying another like $15,000 for. They're paying for hosting, which will be included in this other CMS.
Yeah.
So when we start to have really direct conversations, that's where I think we can get to be strategic and super helpful. I think that with associations, what's really nice is when they do have a clear budget, we can find solutions. What's often challenging is when you talk to any organization of any industry and they say, well, we want the sun, the moon, and the stars. How much is that going to cost? That's a very different conversation than what Allison said, which is, over the next 3 years, these are our goals. This is the budget, and this is what we're hoping to accomplish. And what I mean hoping to accomplish, it's things like, here are the roles that we hope to hire for or not have to need anymore. If you have a platform that you have someone on staff who is just managing that platform and that person wins the lottery, retires, like, what do you do? So those kinds of goals we take into account as well. And so adding all of that together with the budget and thinking sort of long term, I think is where a lot of these conversations have gone. I think they're good conversations to have, especially because my goal always is like, how do we spend the next 10 plus years on whatever we're building for you?
Yeah.
And find the right balance between like bringing in Allison and her team to find ongoing optimizations and drive those like recruitment numbers, the engagement, things like that, while also simplifying your day-to-day life and giving you the free space to think about things like marketing, as opposed to thinking about things like the deployment of content that you need to shut down your association for the next 4 hours for just to publish an article.
Yeah, and you need to involve, IT to just do a simple headline update and all those things. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So we've talked about, challenges, common pain points. Let's talk about solutions. What are some effective strategies associations can use to overcome, their digital marketing challenges?
Yeah, I think I touched on this earlier, but having goals and setting goals, whether it's high level for across your entire association or having marketing goals based on your campaigns, you just need to know what you're working towards so that together, holistically, everyone knows what they're driving towards. And then from there, you can develop an omni-channel strategy. And what I mean by that is you have all these different things that you can do together. You can write a blog, you can post on social media, you can send an email, but making sure that you understand what the campaign goal is and how those interact with each other will really make it an effective strategy. So it takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of people to bring in together to make sure that it makes sense. And it's not even for just what's posted on social media or what email is there. It's then taking that next step to go to the website and to be able to complete whatever action you want them to take. So it does go hand in hand with web and digital marketing. Like you can have an awesome social profile, but once they get to their website, if it's hard to do whatever action you want them to do, you're going to lose them too. So it's very holistic across everything that you need. And then the next step from that is when you have an omni-channel strategy built and you've executed it, looking at the data along the way, making sure that it's actually effective. Are we getting people to click on it? If so, why or why not? Are they converting on the website? Do we have this tracking in Google Analytics? Can we see what that user journey is? It's a lot to build out, especially in a association space where you are doing a lot of things concurrently. But being able to see that whole picture, it will give you the opportunity to then make continued advancements with all of your campaigns too. And it will turn into a lot of looking at the user experience on that website too, to make sure that user feels handheld through the entire experience. So create goals, create an omni-channel strategy, track the data, and make sure that's working.
Yeah, love it. And I feel like that can be said for really any business.
Truly any business.
Any industry.
And something I'd add, because I think that's true for a web project or like digital transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Something else I would add is no limitations also.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's critical, right? I think I just spoke to an association who put out an RFP and they were like, we didn't want any limits. Like, give us the best solution you can think of. And they told me they got some quotes for 200,000 and some for 4 million. And so it's like, but what did you expect? So I think understanding
just a minor discrepancy,
right?
Yeah,
exactly. So I think that notion of like what limitations make sense, knowing that they don't always have to be limitations, right? Like we often prescribe a mentality of crawl, walk, run, where if a lot of associations today, you have an AMS that has a ton of user data. It has a ton of interactions and transactions and historical data on these individuals themselves. And it's very tempting to think about how do we create that unique experience for that person when they come to the website. We can get there for sure. But the idea is, what are the steps that we need to take first? And what limitations do we have along that path? So that we can think about, maybe the first step is a very binary approach to personalization, which is typically where we start, which is this person is logged in or they're not logged in. And that's it. And we'll start there and then gain more data and enrich from there and create more personalization. But if we start by saying like, I need to know Allison is on my site, exactly what Allison has bought, and my site today is, 10 years old, and I want it to do things that I can't, like those are things that we have to work towards.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's where a lot of our conversations start, is sort of, we take these goals, we take the data sources, like where are you gathering data from, and then what are limitations and how long do we have those limitations for? Because for me, it's much, like I said, it's like a transformational approach. It's not so much for an association in general, all of these technologies are super important and super integrated. So any kind of replacement for any of them is going to require a lot of planning and thinking and knowing, what consequences there may be for swapping apart. And we do a really good job of guiding you through that, but we do need to know your limitations too. Otherwise, you'll get a range of, 200,000 to $4 million.
Yeah. I really like the limitations thing too, just thinking of it from my perspective as like a writer, when you get an assignment, they're like, hey, the sky's the limit, you can do whatever. And you're like, but I don't even know like where to start. This could turn into absolutely anything and everything, and it could be terrible or it could be great. So I think that's something, we should all think about. Yeah. So let's talk about digital tools. What kind of tools are essential for associations to succeed? Like digital marketing tools first. Let's talk those.
I always say Google Analytics because I think people underestimate the power that it has, that it can teach you and show you what you want. One of my association clients came to us and they told us they were very focused on Twitter for social media. And we went and looked at their data, and the amount of traffic that was coming from Twitter was their lowest amount of traffic, and more traffic was coming from Facebook. Even though they haven't updated their Facebook page in 10 years, they were getting more traffic to that.
Really?
So we advise them to look at their strategies and where they should put a lot more of their time and effort. Because depending on the demographics of your users and your association members, they might still be a Facebook crowd. And maybe since Twitter changed to X, they aren't on board anymore. Or maybe they're more on Instagram now. So it's looking at the data to see where people are and moving them forward to what they're actually doing versus what you perceive them to do.
Yeah.
I think another tool that people are starting to use is ChatGPT and trying to figure out AI to analyze that data to really help with just overall time savers and where they could get different ideas from, or how could they analyze a performance, or if you export data in an Excel, can AI do that for you?
Yeah.
So it's kind of balancing new technology with existing technology that you're not using. I think those two are really big for digital marketing and tracking goals. I could get more into like other tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs for looking at overall organic traffic, but I think the big piece is understanding your data, understanding the user behavior, and then changing your strategies to reflect that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, in a lot of your responses to my questions today, a lot of it just goes back to understanding that data and making smart decisions based off that data. So
Yeah,
that makes
absolutely.
sense. Will, how about you? What kind of tools are we talking about here? I'm sure there's a ton.
There's a million
Yeah.
S's, right? There's the AMS, LMS,
Alphabet soup.
CMS. I mean, I think that this is where a lot of our work is happening right now, in associations in particular, but a ton of industries, is kind of understanding what solutions are required. And I'm saying solutions specifically, not like what kinds of tools.
Okay.
And when I'm talking about a solution, it's sort of like, what gap does that fill in your business? Because I think that what we found, and in the association world in particular, we're coming a little bit out of this generation of massive monolithic platforms that have defined associations for the past 20 plus years of, this is an all-in-one solution that does event management, dues, it does purchasing, publications, everything, but it doesn't do everything well. It does everything good enough.
Yeah.
And what that's led to is a lot of association clients have had to sort of bolt on, well, we're not going to use the event tool from this AMS, we're going to get something else, but we're still paying the licensing for that event tool and this new thing. And so I think for us, where we are starting a lot of these conversations is not necessarily about like the tools themselves, but about like what your business does, and thinking about what needs to be delivered in each of those different arenas. Because it's true with associations, but it's also true with every industry, right?
Yeah.
Like we see this happening with a lot of the CMS partners we work with that have historically been massive enterprise level products that are starting to strip their products down into different composable pieces.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of what I would say if I were, in the shoes of an association, right? The first thing is definitely call American Eagle.
Yeah.
But after that, that's the conversation that I would have, is like, these are the things that we do online. And then we talk about what you're using to do that. We see if there's overlap, and we see where the challenges are. Because I think the world that we live in today, I don't want to knock those old platforms. It was much harder to integrate any kind of data when these platforms were growing. So they served a very important purpose. But now it's much simpler to rely on APIs, rely on middleware, and we can break these solutions apart and really be kind of surgical with like, this platform really hits what we need digital asset management to do. And so we don't need to buy everything else out there just to get the digital asset management we want.
Yeah. And I think I even heard the opposite too for some of the small associations. There was one that came up to us this weekend at ASAE that said, we have a certification board and we need a certification management tool. Right now I have a developer who manipulated a plugin on WordPress, and that's what we're using. And I'm like, okay, so I think we need to talk a little bit more high level of, can we get it? They didn't have a CRM, they didn't have an AMS. So I'm like, what's that next step to build upon that? Because some people just have a one-off developer that they pay on the side that's not a dedicated employee. So it's talking about expanding on the other side too. So there's a lot balancing between all those.
For sure. And I think it's a question too of thinking outside the box when we can, because a lot of these smaller associations that we talk to, their needs are not necessarily for an AMS.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're a Diamond HubSpot partner. There's a lot of associations, especially smaller ones, societies in particular, nonprofits, that can probably get a huge amount of benefit from using HubSpot as a CRM and just applying some AMS style approaches to it. So I think that that's kind of back to that question of what are the gaps we're filling, and then finding whatever that tool may be, and trying to avoid too much like building out custom things that make a tool do more than it's meant to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And like, just from, my marketing perspective and, working on the team that markets all of these platforms we're partnered with, they're all, like you said, moving towards, we don't have to be everything to everyone. You can use we're, composable in this way, we're composable in that way. And it's kind of like a plug and play of what works for your business. And I think, I don't know a lot, but that feels like it's a trend that's going to be here to stay for a while.
And it's composable is not necessarily the best fit for everyone.
Yeah.
But a composable kind of mentality could be a good approach, right? Where maybe it is that you do want one of these CMSs that has digital asset management, that has personalization, enterprise search, all these things. But how do we think about, again, the gaps that all of that's filling and not needing to go elsewhere to double up on a platform? Because like we said, a couple minutes ago, cost is incredibly important. And so when we think about customizing a platform or, having duplicate platforms doing the same thing, all of that adds to cost. And then there's the cost of like the employee that wins the lottery cost, right? If we build something super custom, what is the cost of maintaining this one of a kind solution that only one person on the planet knows how to maintain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how you mentioned earlier, just to close off this point of like, you guys compare, what will this new solution cost? But what if you don't do something new, what is that going to cost you too? Because there's going to be a cost associated with both sides, no matter which decision you make and which, route you take. So how do you guys see the landscape for associations changing in the next few years?
You want me to start?
Sure.
I think it's going the way that I sort of described of, and like we're in it right now, which is an evaluation of these platforms that have been so prominent in the space. And even these platforms themselves are trying to figure out what they're doing. So I think a lot of them are moving to a composable approach where they have a lot of historical data from an association. They understand that they are not a CMS company. Like that was a big trend 10 years ago when I started here, was all these AMSs had a website builder.
Okay.
Which didn't go great. So I think that as opposed to that mentality of like, yeah, we can be everything for everyone, it's more what do we do really well and how do we break off this piece and still be relevant and appropriate for an association. So I think that like breaking up technology into different parts is where a lot of the technology is going. I feel like the strategy side is trying to take lessons, like I mentioned earlier, from other industries and other worlds. So it's not about, like, I get a ton of RFPs and conversations from associations from every industry saying that, like, we want an Amazon-like user experience. Amazon's user experience is hideous.
Yeah.
Like, it's a terrible user experience.
Yeah.
What they have is a good information architecture, which they've sort of lost, but they have a lot of data and it's easy to navigate once you're in it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the goal, is like when you go to Amazon today, like you have Taylor's Amazon, which has been tailor made for you.
Yeah.
Right? You know,
I like the pun.
yeah, you just walked into that one. But that's the truth. It's like, imagine going into a grocery store and instead of having like the deli aisle, the vegetable aisle, the dairy aisle, it's like Taylor's aisle.
Would love that because I walk around aimlessly all the
Exactly.
time.
And that's kind of what associations, I think, are starting to understand that they can provide, is that they have things like publications, webinars, a ton of learning opportunities, events, all this historical data too, that could be presented to people in that kind of experience where it's like curated for them. And so I think that's where they're trying to go. And that's what an Amazon-like user experience is. It has nothing to do with the front end.
Yeah.
It is that sense of personalization and really like content experiences that make sense for people. That's how we drive conversions. That's how we get engagement up, right? Like, is engagement's not just sort of a, nebulous idea. It is consumption of articles, consumption of different videos, it's registrations, it's all of those activities that tell us that someone is gaining something from our association. So I think that that is where associations are going to go. And I think it's our job to figure out where the technology fits in.
Yeah.
And sort of what technology makes sense, and making sure that it sort of fits your organization too. That it's like, it's something that you guys can take after implementation, run it effectively, scale it like we talked about, and that it's something that keeps feeding your association over time rather than just being like a barrier, which I think a lot of association technology has been for a long time, is like, we do all these things in spite of the roadblocks that we get in our tools.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
How about you from a digital marketing perspective?
From a digital perspective, we've seen a lot of overall brand identity and looking at themselves as a whole, because a lot of associations say we haven't changed in 20, 30 years. And it's not necessarily just like logo, it's the personality of the brand too. So as they're kind of going through the tech side, they're also looking at who are we and who do we want to be to our membership base. So even looking at social media, the content on your website, how you send out emails, are they personalized? Do they have a window into your organization of what it looks like, what it feels like, what it means to be a member? So going into the video capabilities, looking at what you're doing on Facebook, there's been a lot more like user-generated content because of Instagram and TikTok. You even see those like get ready with me, like you see how someone gets ready.
Yeah.
Now you don't have to do that as like a professional in the association space, but it's like, what's the window into the association that you want people to see? You want to give the warm and fuzzies to make them want to stay and be engaged and retain these members. So it's a lot of creativity that's coming more on board versus the cyclical rotation that associations kind of typically go through. So it's a lot of been looking at brand voice, looking at the content on your website to see if it guides a user through something, if they can understand what they're supposed to do, if they're supposed to register for an event, or how they look up membership events, or how they buy a book, or how they can apply for a certification. There's a lot of that going on because it's been so cut and dry and just kind of blasé that with everything that's been happening, it's really shaking up everything within the association space. So we're all kind of going through user-generated content, trying to see how we can be relatable to our membership base and make them feel special too. So some of the social techniques that we've seen and we've used is like having a social takeover from the president, or a feature on a board member, or a member spotlight. People love to see themselves. I know, I'm like, tag me. I'll share it, no problem. But people like to feel that way too. So it's kind of humanizing a lot of what we're doing, and they've really been pulling in the diversity element too. So with the web stuff, looking at accessibility and usability across the websites too, so that we are inclusive of people who might have color blindness, or might be hard of hearing, or have bad eyesight, things like that. It's all being taken into account for more recently. So it's really evolving from your like dry membership experience to like, hey, we're a fun club that you should really join because we have all these great things to do.
I think that's super true, especially because I don't just do associations. A lot of my clients are also credit unions and higher education, where that kind of brand identity is critical. You know, like especially credit unions where you have a million banking options, but a credit union or community bank really presents a very specific kind of member feel. It's not just about I'm going to bank with this person. It's about why I'm going to bank with this person, what I identify with. And so I think Allison's point is totally accurate of how do we move from just like what do we do in the sense of we provide membership, we do advocacy, we sell publications, all of that, into like, why do we do it and who do we do it for? Who do we do it with? And I think that answers a lot of those different questions that Allison was talking about accessibility, about, you know, brand voice, because I think that is really critical. That hits all those different three main goals we talked about, those pillars of like recruiting. How do we grow our membership? Well, we show the membership who they are. right? We
Yeah.
show
Mhm.
people who are not currently members that they have a place here and why they have a place here. And when we do a better brand experience, that increases engagement, right? It goes beyond just I am a member because I have to have this certification and I come in once a year, I pay my dues and I check out. It gives a sense of coming back, of newness to the organization, of a sense of I want to read what's being published. I want to watch these webinars. I want to go to these events because it reflects something that matters to me, which of course then drives retention. It's like that is a priority to me to stay a member of this association. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. And even 10 to 15 years ago, there was like a membership calculator. So it's like, here's your dues. Here's
Yes.
the value of the newsletter. Here's the value of
Mhm.
this magazine. So
Really?
it's like,
Oh my
I'm getting
gosh.
my money's worth.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're beyond that. Like,
Yeah.
monetary value. It's like, are you making me feel special? Can I do my job better? Is there a place where I can talk to like-minded others with problems that I'm facing that you might have a solution for that we can't figure out internally?
Mhm.
It's more than that tangible dollar amount.
Yeah, I love that you both made that point. I think just human nature, now we've moved, the climate has changed. A lot of us have moved towards that. We want a human connection with the brands that we use, and the things that we spend our money on
Mhm.
means a little bit more than just throwing it
Mhm.
away just because we have to.
Yeah.
So I like
Mhm.
that point a lot. So my very last question for both of you is just, what is one thing, or what is your top recommendation for associations looking to enhance, their digital presence or digital marketing efforts? If you can think of one thing.
Plan. Just take a step back, evaluate your landscape, and plan what you're going to do moving forward. When I was in my role, it was just get it out, get it out, get it out. I don't think I had a month calendar ready at any point in the day because everything was changing all the
Yeah.
time. But working collaboratively with your entire team and planning out what you're going to do and making sure you have that communication moving forward is really going to help you advance in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
I mean, I was just going to say, call me, but,
That works too.
or Allison.
I think that's great.
But the second piece of advice I would give is to sit down and think about your association, not based on the departments you have, but based on the offerings you provide, right? Which is how a member sees you,
Yeah.
right? They don't see, oh, membership does this and events does this. They see, I'm a member. These events are important to me. These publications are important to me. This advocacy is important to me. And start thinking about the services sort of based on a member's perspective. And maybe different member types have different goals, different priorities, etc. And I think when you start doing that, that will sort of inspire you to think about how you present yourself to the world. And that's really where this whole conversation starts. Right, is when we start a new website project for an association, it is get away from the dairy aisle and from the deli aisle and think about the Taylor aisle, right? And that's kind of the starting point. That would be my advice, is like, think about who your Taylor is and who your Allison is and who your Will is. And like, think about those experiences, and that will tell you, are we serving those people? Is there a gap in the way we're serving those people? Is there a gap in the way we're thinking about them? And so that's where I would start. And then from there too, that leads you to planning, leads you to call me. And then that leads you to success.
And
right?
there you have it, folks. That is the plan for success. Thank you both so much for joining me today. I learned a lot, and it was a really nice time talking to you.
Thanks for having us. We had fun too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Modern Marketing Messages. Check out below for more information about this episode and AmericanEagle.com's digital marketing services. This podcast is brought to you by AmericanEagle.com Studios. I'm Taylor Karg, and we'll be back with another Modern Marketing Message.